This video is a deep dive into the lore and story of Doom the Dark Ages. It will contain spoilers. The story of the Dark Ages takes place during the war between Hell and the Sentinels of Argent D'Nur and beyond. To understand the places, people, gods, how everything is connected to this war specifically, and what it means for future DLC, we have to go back to the beginning. In this video timeline, we explore the lore, deep history of Argent D'Nur, and then the story of Doom the Dark Ages. Timestamps are in the description. Grab some snacks and relax. It is going to be a long one. Our story begins millennia before the Dark Ages, in a different dimension altogether. The cosmic realm was a place of unfathomable dread. Reality twisted, sanity wavered, and the skies churned with colors beyond comprehension. Yet, life here not only endured, but flourished. From endless blackened seas and acidic lakes to ancient temples and ruined cities, creatures both colossal and minute carved out their existence. Giant eyes watched from turbulent skies, tentacles slid silently around crumbling structures, titans roamed the shifting landscape, and even the realm itself seemed to feed on the madness that permeated every shadow. Over all of them loomed the Old One, the god to whom many offered their worship, though not every creature here wished to remain under its rule. The Wraiths, beings of cunning and immense power, longed for life instead of madness, and through their advanced technology, they constructed a vessel. With many of them on board, the vessel set course through the void, not merely to another region of the cosmic realm, but instead into a new dimension, the earthly realm. This was an age before man, before war, before anything at all. It was a time defined by endless possibility. After surviving the journey through the void between dimensions, the Wraith vessel drifted among the stars of a vast and silent universe. This continued until the vessel collided with a barren world. Whether this landing was intentional or the result of some miscalculation remains unknown. Given the events that followed, it seems likely a world devoid of life was chosen for their work to begin. The vessel did not simply crash, it pierced the planet from pole to pole, and from its hull emerged the Wraith in great hordes. Each Wraith, alongside the vessel itself, released a surge of life-giving energy known now as the Wraith Call. Where there had once been only emptiness, life began to take hold. The soil gave rise to lush plant life, and animals emerged from the newly awakened land. Among them stood the mighty Ancestrals. These titans were invigorated by the magic of the Wraith Call that coursed through their blood, and they became the world's first apex predators. From their home, the World Spear, the Wraith watched these creatures as they became a part of a living ecosystem. Although the Wraith had granted life to a dead world, the Ancestrals sought only destruction. Mountains trembled as Tharok the Mighty and Elegus the Wise met in a deadly duel, yet these giants were not the only intelligent life on this world. From the land, the Wraith had also breathed life into the first humans. These early people were small and weak compared to the mountain-sized creatures that wandered above them. To avoid the Titans, the humans lived in tribes hidden in the shadows. In their mountain forges, they learned the secret of the sword and hammered steel until it could cut through flesh. Weary of the destruction brought by the Ancestrals, the elemental Wraith blessed the human with their Wraith magics. Given time to harness this power, they enchanted their weapons and armor. Some among them mastered mystical arts, learning to summon the energy of the Wraith at will. Armed with this newfound strength, they drove the Ancestrals into the bleak valleys where those ancient titans eventually died out. With the aid of the Wraith from the World Spear, these tribes claimed the world as their own. They called themselves the Argenta, the people of Argent D'Nur. This marked the beginning of the time of man. With complete dominion over their world, the Argenta cultivated the land, while scattered tribes gathered into villages and mighty cities began to rise. They crowned their first king, King Onero, yet never forgot the trials that shaped them, nor the powers that delivered them from the ancestrals. With the founding of a great church, the Wraith were elevated to the status of gods. To safeguard their divine benefactors and the sacred land, the Order of the Night Sentinels rose. They became an army of Argent D'Nur's strongest warriors, honed in mind and body, sworn to the eternal defense of their homeland. For a time, the people worked the land, learned about themselves, and studied the past to prepare for the future. They sought guidance from the Wraith, traveled to the World Spear on pilgrimages, and used the blessings their gods had granted to build a new future. Yet, the Old One's bond with the Wraith was unlike any other. To find them, after all of this time, it traversed the void between dimensions and discovered where they had settled. It is unknown why the Old One traveled to the earthly realm, but I believe it is because it wanted to bring the Wraiths and their power back to their home domain. This deity threatened all the Wraith had built, so they called upon their protectors, the Night Sentinels, for aid in a cosmic battle whose details have been lost to history. The Night Sentinels fought beside their Wraith gods and subdued the Old One with a weapon forged by Astral Forge Kings, the Ballistic Force Crossbow. Unable to kill it, the god was weakened. The Wraiths parted the northern sea of Estvovia, and a vast prison was constructed for the Titan. Stasis emitters were placed throughout the prison to keep the Old One docile. When ready, the waters of the sea were returned to their place, and the prison of the Old One, known as the Spire of Nerethal, a sole island, was erased from all Sentinel maps. Should the Titan ever escape its prison, the Ballistic Force Crossbow was left within, just in case it was needed. However, the breach between dimensions left a wound, a cosmic scar that remained open. As time passed, the cosmic realm felt the absence of their god, imprisoned in another dimension, and longed for its return. Meanwhile, on Argent D'Nur, the mighty Wraiths who had once stood beside the Argenta retreated to the World Spear and entered a deep slumber. Though only a theory, this may have been a consequence of their battle with the Old One. This left the people of Argent D'Nur to endure alone, surviving only with the tools and magic their gods had left behind. Many years later, during the reign of King Etrux, Argent D'Nur entered the time of grief. During these years, the people of Argent D'Nur suffered greatly. Natural disasters shattered their cities, barbarian hordes who had never joined the greater civilization plundered the weak for gold, and disease claimed many lives. The people flocked to the churches and begged the Wraith to return from their slumber and offer aid, but the gods never answered. The Argenta were left to rebuild and persevere through this hardship alone. But then, all of this changed when white porcelain beings descended from the skies, arriving from another world. The Maker Angels had long observed the people of this world, and at last chose to intervene. As beings from the heavenly dimension of Urdak, they possessed the power to bend both space and time. They were unlike anything the Sentinels had ever witnessed. No sword or shield could harm them, and they came bearing an offer for this young civilization. In return for their worship, the Maker offered great knowledge and safety, both in this world and the next. Should their mortal bodies perish, their undying souls would be granted eternal peace, reunited with their loved ones in the heavenly realm of Urdak. The people of Argent D'Nur had endured countless hardships and felt abandoned by the gods who had once blessed them. Believing themselves to be in a desperate situation, King Etrux accepted the offer of the Queen Maker. In doing so, the churches of Argent D'Nur turned their worship from the Wraith to the Maker Angels. Despite the outlawing of the worship of the Wraith, the Order of the Night Sentinels still stood guard and watched over them, but not all was as it seemed. Within the grand realm of Urdak, the Maker Gods had lost their leader. The Father was not only their ruler, but also the source of energy that sustained their realm and its population. After his disappearance, the Maker searched for a new source of energy to sustain themselves, and in the people of Argent D'Nur, they found exactly what they needed. The Sentinels of Argent D'Nur had built their entire civilization upon the worship and blessings of the Wraiths. Even after their gods had vanished, the Sentinels had carved vast mines to harvest the fossilized remains of the ancient ancestrals. On the edge of a storm-lashed coast stood the mining village of Khalim, where extraction rigs drew primordium essence from the veins of the ancestrals. This raw Wraith energy was refined into Sentinel energy, which powered the world. As for how this helped the Makers, a steady flow of Sentinel energy was directed into Urdak. Meanwhile, the cosmic realm grew restless without their god and breached through the void and sowed chaos. It reached out across dimensions, alternate realities, space and time, drawing in those who sought adventure and forbidden knowledge. In doing so, just one region of the realm, the Temple of Lomarith, became a vast graveyard for sea vessels that had strayed into this twisted realm and could never escape. Their crews were consumed by madness. On Argent D'Nur, the battle with the Old One had nearly faded from memory. Even the Makers knew little of its details, but this did not stop Argentan scholars, seers, and oracles from seeking proof of another realm beyond the void. They hoped to find a realm that might have been a home for their Wraith gods and lost knowledge. For those who managed to peer inside, even for an instant, madness was the only reward. With the gifts and guidance of the Makers, the Sentinels of Argent D'Nur entered an age of peace and advancement. They expanded their understanding of technology and the universe and constructed vessels capable of traversing the stars. They took to the skies, explored distant worlds, and spread the word of the Maker to all they encountered. The Bethian clansmen journeyed farther than any other, establishing a colony on the world of Hebeth. Here, they built a great port city, its slipgate portals offering passage across the universe. In ages yet to come, Hebeth would become known to another civilization as Mars. High above the clouds, the holy city of Aratum floated in the sky. The Sentinels, honouring their history, built a grand cathedral at its heart. Within its vault were relics from ages long past. Priests and scholars from across the world travelled to Aratum to study relics from the age of the Ancestrals, the time of grief, and many other eras. This was a civilization founded upon tradition, and this sanctuary in the clouds offered refuge from the futile wars that raged below. For a time, all was well. During the reign of King Novik, Argent D'Nur entered its darkest era. Novik had endured many trials over his decades on the throne. His wife had passed away, but he still carried a piece of her in their daughter, Princess Thira, the presumed heir to the Sentinel throne. Thira, like several other across the planet, was born with a natural connection to the mystical arts of Wraith magic. Before her mother's death, she had tried to guide Thira in these arts. After her passing, Thira chose to follow her father's path and underwent the brutal training required to become a Night Sentinel. Now, Thira was more gifted than most in the arts of magic, though she rarely revealed her abilities to others. Whether her gift was inherited remains unknown, but she would play a crucial role in the war to come. Personally, I believe this Wraith power was passed down through the generations. It was just outside of the walls of the holy city of Sentinel Prime that an Outlander arrived through a portal from another dimension. Not from Urdak or the Cosmic Realm, but one of horror. Hell. This human had fought for countless years against waves of demonic hordes, but when he was discovered by Sentinel scouts, he was bloodied, broken, and bruised. He spoke of blood, gore, and demons from a fiery realm. By Argentan tradition, he was taken before the priests of the Order of Daig, who sentenced him to combat in the arena, a place in which the condemned were given a single chance to fight for a place in the Argentan Standard Army, or to die. The Outlander, a human marine from another world and another time, fought with unmatched fury, unleashing his rage upon every opponent. By proving himself in the arena, he earned the right to fight as a warrior in the Argenta army for the rest of his days. Yet, the Khanmaker grew curious about the dark realm he described, wondering if its power could be harnessed to ensure the survival of her own kind. Meanwhile, in the shadowed pits of Hell's blackest citadel, Prince Ahzrak was raised, steeped in the dread knowledge bestowed upon him by dark priests. He believed he was destined to rule this horrid domain, but the denizens of Hell did not fear him. They feared the human who had escaped. Back on Argent D'Nur, although the Khanmaker has sought the dark realm the Outlander spoke of, it was the realm that had found them instead. From fiery gates, the Dark Ones poured into Argent D'Nur in great hordes. They overran the obsidian forests of the Argentine overlands, the Alorum clans of the Eastern Mountains fell, and the city of Talorum collapsed beneath their swarm. The Order of the Night Sentinels leapt into action to defend their world from these invaders, who seemed driven only to torment mortals. Yet, word soon reached Commander Thira, Commander Valen, and even King Novik of the Outlander's feats. The Outlander did not fear these creatures. He relished the battle. He ripped and tore the demon horde, unyielding, vanquishing more enemies than even the strongest sentinels. The Order of the Night Sentinels had always been exclusive. Never before had an arena-born warrior, let alone one from another world, been considered for induction. But these were extraordinary times. He knew the enemy better than any, and for the first time in Sentinel history, an outsider was welcomed into the Order of the Night Sentinels. Under Commander Valen's command, the Outlander was taken to the Sentinel training facility at Taroth, a region with a history all of its own. It had been built upon the titanic skeletal remains of ancestrals. It was also home to a dragon aviary, reserved for only the strongest sentinels in mind and body, those able to form a bond with these creatures. These elite warriors were known as the Order of Aram. The Outlander proved his dedication once more through rigorous training, and for the first time since his arrival, the Sentinels glimpsed a softer side of the human as he bonded with his dragon, Serrat. Together, they took to the skies and dominated the creatures below. Each battle in this war was fiercer than the last, and for the human marine, the Battle of Black Pyres was among the worst. Serrat was grievously wounded by the malevolent creatures, and in desperation, the Outlander did everything in his power to save his loyal companion. Following Commander Thira's orders, Serrat received immediate medical attention. Although his front legs and wings were badly damaged, the healers attempted something never before done. They fused technology with flesh, transforming Serrat into a living war machine. He recovered, emerging stronger than before, the perfect dragon for the mightiest warrior. For some time, Argent D'Nur endured relentless assaults from the forces of Hell. Commander Valen, Commander Thira, and the other leaders fought beneath King Novik's banner to keep their people safe. In the cosmic realm, however, something dark stirred. The congealed madness of this realm took physical form. She went by the name Ulzamir, a witch of vast cosmic power. All she desired was a return of her god, the Old One, to the cosmic realm. So she peered into other dimensions seeking any trace of it. As the Black Star reached its zenith, a howling darkness gathered just beyond the mountain rise to the east of Argent D'Nur's capital city of Taras Nabad. With them also came a monstrous titan, the Dreadnought. As it advanced, the Dreadnought destroyed everything in its path. Once more, the Night Sentinels were dispatched to confront the threat, but this creature was unlike any before. Many fell as temples, churches, and homes in Taras Nabad were laid to waste. Even the Outlander, despite all of his rage, could not bring it down. In a distant spire, Sama Maker, advisor to the Khan Maker, heard the whispers of the Dark Lord, unaware that these voices guided his actions. He was told that the Khan Maker would lead their kind to ruin, and that by aiding the Outlander, he could prevent this fate. In Argent D'Nur's darkest hour, Sama Maker led the Outlander into the Chapel of Purity. Here, a device had been built under the Queen Maker's command, once again unknown to her, inspired by the Dark Lord's whispers. He had played upon her fears that a chosen one would threaten her rule, and this cosmic machine was designed to root out such a threat. It was powered by the essence of the Dark Lord himself. Many Night Sentinels had entered the divinity machine before, and all had perished, judged unclean and unworthy by the Khan Maker. But without his queen's knowledge, Sama placed the human inside and reversed the polarity. What emerged from the machine had absorbed the power of the Dark Lord, becoming a god in his own right. A being infused with the Maker and celestial energies, fueled by boundless rage. He now possessed unmatched strength, speed, resilience, and the ability to heal. With this newfound power, the Outlander became a legend among the Night Sentinels. Using the gifts bestowed upon him by the Rogue Maker, he brought down the Dreadnought. He carved his way through the doom that had befallen Taras Nabad, and in that moment became something more. He became the Doomslayer. The Khan Maker, however, was furious that Sama had acted without her permission, but before she could punish him, he had already fled. It was on the port world of Hebeth that Sentinel scientists developed a creation designed to shift the tide of the war. This was the Transdimensional Barrier, a colossal construction designed to halt demonic incursions and breaches from the Hell Dimension. Powered by Ethereum crystals, it produced an immense field that shielded the earthly dimension from invasion. In theory, this was fantastic for the Sentinel civilization across their worlds. By this time, Hell had already corrupted many minds. It had lured once esteemed scholars and seekers of forbidden knowledge into dark pacts for power. Although Hell itself was prevented from opening portals between dimensions, these Sentinel cultists gathered and tore open rifts for the armies of Hell to invade. However, these incursions came in smaller waves than before. In the Dark Realm, Prince Ahzrak was granted command over the forces of Hell by the High Council, sealed by an ancient blood oath. He sought to claim Argent D'Nur, the souls of its mortals, and the rest of the earthly realm. The beast who had ripped and torn through his realm had grown stronger than ever, and the young prince hungered for control. He could not claim true dominion while the legions he commanded feared another more than they feared him. The Khan Maker, leader of her kind, was also troubled by the power the Slayer held. His strength rivaled her own. Through her ministry, she proclaimed that the right of the divinity machine had been her idea all along, a calculated plan to create a superweapon. Such power demanded control. Even King Novik was wary of the Slayer's new power and agreed with the Queen Maker when she proposed a drastic solution to control him. Using Maker technology, a tether was crafted and fastened to the Outlander's suit. This device monitored his every mental and physical function, keeping him in a state of darkness until he was called upon. His mind was purged, his emotions suppressed, until only rage remained. With a superweapon at their command, the Doomslayer was placed under the authority of the newly appointed Bishop of the Maker Ministry, the Creed Maker, who was also put in charge of the flow of Sentinel energy to Urdak. Whenever the Makers or Night Sentinels called for aid, the Slayer was deployed, given his objectives, and then returned to stasis once the mission was complete. He became little more than a puppet, controlled by those who wielded his power, enslaved to the will of gods and kings. With a lead on the location of the Old One, Ulzamir reached out to a potential ally. She sensed that Prince Ahzrak desired control over Hell and its legions, but he faced an obstacle, one she could help him overcome. The Cosmic Realm was a source of immense power, and it was the homeworld of the elemental wraiths. Although unconfirmed, it is likely she revealed to him the true power of the Wraith, their origin, and that this power could be harnessed using an artifact the Sentinels called the Heart of Argent, a hidden artifact capable of granting him the powers of a god, enough to challenge the Slayer. In return for her aid, she asked that he help restore her god to the Cosmic Realm. In an unholy alliance between Hell and the Cosmic Realm, Prince Ahzrak worked with the Witch, but the High Council was not happy with this union. They were wary of her. And so began the hunt for the Heart of Argent. Sentinel cultists were manipulated into opening portals between dimensions at sites where the Witch believed the artifact was hidden. Every time, the Slayer was deployed with the Night Sentinels, fully under the Maker's control. With the main points of the backstory set, I think we can finally begin the story of Doom the Dark Ages. I wanted to introduce every character, realm, and mystery so that even the smallest references are understood, how they fit into the timeline. There are other parts of Argent D'Nur's history that are not super important I have not included because if I mentioned everything, this would be a very long video. This is about the Dark Ages, so anything Earth or the Slayer's story before his arrival here have not been touched. With that said, let's begin. As time passed, attacks on Argent D'Nur and its colonies grew even more frequent as more minds succumbed to the lure of the Dark Realm. On the Witch's advice, Prince Ahzrak ordered an assault on the mining village of Khalim. She believed the Heart of Argent lay nearby, and with the corrupted minds of Sentinel cultists at her disposal, hordes of demonic entities flooded through the rifts they generated. The trans-dimensional barrier on Hebeth could do only so much to protect this realm, and no one could predict whose mind would fall next to corruption. As another assault began, King Novik, Commander Thira, and the Night Sentinels once again rode to the defense. As villagers fell to these monstrous entities, the Witch and the Hell Priests looked down upon the chaos they had brought. But this assault, like so many before it, proved to be a fool's errand. The artifact was nowhere to be found, and they knew it was only a matter of time before the Night Sentinels would call for the Slayer to purge the village of demonic corruption. It was Commander Thira who contacted the Bishop and asked for the help of the Slayer, but he cared only for the defense of his own temple and those within. Yet, when Thira explained that Khalim was essential to the production of Sentinel energy, derived from the primordium essence mined there, the Bishop relented. Even he feared the wrath of the Khan Maker, for if the flow of energy to Urdak were interrupted, it could spell disaster for their kind. Upon his deployment in Khalim, the Slayer began his mission to purge the village of demonic entities. Meanwhile, King Novik warned all Sentinels in the region to stay clear. This entity could prove deadly if interrupted, but his fury was reserved for the cultists who had betrayed their own and the demons in his path. After shutting down the hell gates that bridged the realms, the Slayer was informed that a Titan had been summoned at the South Bay, a monstrous foe he destroyed with a turret. This warrior was simply a tool of the Makers and the Night Sentinels. So, when his mission was completed, he was pulled back to the Bishop's ship and stored until he was required again. With the assault thwarted, the Hell Priests grew increasingly frustrated with the witch. Prince Ahzrak trusted her more than his own kind, and on these battlefields, it was not Ulzamir who fell to the Slayer, but the demons themselves, treated like expendable fodder. Prince Ahzrak understood his own strength and what the artifact could offer him. He commanded all the power of hell, but his armies did not fear him. They feared the Slayers. If he could not defeat the beast yet without the artifact, he would break the humans first. The world of Hebeth was of great importance to the Night Sentinels. It was home to a thriving city, a weapons research lab, and, most crucially, the trans-dimensional barrier that shielded the realm. If the Demon Prince hoped to break humanity and sow fear across every world the Sentinels governed, this barrier had to fall. Just as he had done in the village of Khalim, Prince Ahzrak commanded his Dark Lords to sway the mortal minds on Hebeth that were susceptible to corruption, forcing them to open Hellgates and create bridges between the realms. By the time the Night Sentinels and the Creedmaker's ship arrived upon the Red Planet, a full-scale assault had already begun. Titans roamed the valleys, imps hurled themselves at warriors, and mancubi stalked the facility. The Sentinels soon realized the true intent behind the assault and once again called upon the Makers for aid. They needed the Slayer. The Bishop of the Maker Ministry was a powerful entity, entrusted by the Khan Maker to oversee this district of the realm. His primary concern, however, was his own safety and the protection of his ship. Demonic incursions had already occurred despite the barrier's presence. Why risk his own kind when it seemed nothing would change? It was one of his drones that explained. Each portal opened by a corrupted mind was like a leak in a dam. If the trans-dimensional barrier were to fall, Hell would gain full access to this realm. Meanwhile, in the holding area, the Doomslayer waited alone. All he heard were the cries of innocence. He saw only darkness and felt nothing but pure rage. Since his enslavement, he had pushed against this mental barrier as much as he could, slowly gaining a resistance to the tether. But before he could truly break free, the Maker drones watching over him increased the power of the device, forcing him back into submission. In frustration, and with the threat to the flow of Sentinel energy growing, the Bishop agreed to deploy the Slayer. As the Sentinels battled around him, the Slayer fought his way through the research facility. He seized new weapons, defeated a Hell Knight, and hunted for the source of the demonic invasion. With each kill, his strength grew, and he reveled in the carnage. At last, he found the cultist responsible and cast them down into hell. Although the Slayer had completed his objective, there was always more to be done. The connection between Hell and Hebeth had closed, but Titans still roamed the land, intent on their new goal: the destruction of the generator that powered the barrier. To stop them, the Slayer needed even greater power and speed, a strength he found in an Atlan. On his way to the barrier core, the Slayer smashed, ripped, and tore his way through the Titans in his path. By the time he reached the generator, it had already suffered heavy damage. As the generator failed, the trans-dimensional barrier began to shut down. The mission had failed, but the Slayer pressed on. As demonic incursions surged across the realm, The Slayer moved forward towards the unstable reactor. The world was still inhabited, and if the core exploded, it would wipe out the population. To save as many mortals as possible, and with Commander Thira's assistance, the Slayer ripped the unstable core from the generator and carried it to an abandoned strip mine. There, he disposed of it before it could explode, destroying a fearsome titan in the process. Prince Ahzrak watched as the earthly realm became accessible to his kind once more. It was a great victory for Hell and a devastating blow to humanity. Meanwhile, the Creedmaker demanded an official report from the Sentinels to deliver to the Khan, eager to cover his own tracks. As Hebeth fell to the remaining demons, the defeated Knight Sentinels returned to Argent D'Nur to prepare for the next assault. It was through the exploration of mines susceptible to corruption that Prince Ahzrak had come across Daig Lorik. Lorik was a Sentinel priest who, against the traditions of his order, had secretly married a woman. He had dedicated his life to the preservation of ancient Sentinel and Maker history and artifacts, a passion that had set him apart from his peers who had devoted themselves solely to the Maker doctrine. Lorik also knew of the Heart of Argent and its location. Perhaps by coincidence or manipulation, his wife fell gravely ill. When Ahzrak made contact, he offered a bargain. Lorik's wife's soul would be granted peace if the priest revealed the artifact's location. If we look deeper, this moment mirrors a later event in the timeline. Commander Vaylin was offered peace for the soul of his son by a Hell Priest in exchange for a favor. In Vaylin's case, he was haunted by visions of his child's suffering. The contract between Prince Ahzrak and Daig Lorik, I believe, may have been the same. In this desperate moment, Daig Lorik told Prince Ahzrak that the Heart of Argent was with many other of Sentinel artifacts, sealed away in a vault in the floating city of Aratum. The Demon Prince knew the Sentinels would try to thwart his plans, so as he advanced towards Aratum with the Witch and his horde to claim it, he also dispatched another wave of demons to the Sentinel barracks at Kantoth, hoping to draw their defenders away. As expected, Daig Lorik, now a traitor to his own kind, sent a distress call to the Knight Sentinels. He warned them that Prince Ahzrak was behind the assaults and sought the Heart of Argent, an artifact even the Sentinels did not fully understand. They knew it had been discovered in AR-722 and it held the soul of the last Wraith, but unsure of how it worked, they had sealed it away. Before the Sentinels could mobilize for Aratum, Ahzrak's minions attacked the barracks, free to open portals wherever they wanted without the limitation of the trans-dimensional barrier, stalling their response. With so much at stake, the Slayer was once again deployed to purge the area, buying the Sentinels time to prepare and depart. Once the Beast's mission was complete, Thira ordered Serrat to be prepared, allowing the Slayer to join the Sentinels in the skies. Upon his arrival, the Slayer found that the demons had conjured a barrier around the city's central cathedral, which housed the vault, and he was told that this force field was powered by 4 Hell Carrier ships. With Serrat's mounted turret, the Doomslayer destroyed each ship and brought down the barrier, but before he could enter the vault, aware of his power, Ulzamir sealed the entrance. What neither the Witch or Ahzrak anticipated, however, was the arrival of the Warrior King, who had already entered the vault. King Novik understood that Prince Ahzrak could not be allowed to claim the Heart of Argent. The loss of the transdimensional barrier had already been a devastating blow. In preparation for this moment, the Sentinels had planted explosives throughout the city, better for it to fall than risk another defeat. At his king's signal, Commander Vaylin triggered the detonations as Novik seized the artifact and escaped with the help of a rope lowered by Vaylin. As the king and the Sentinels escaped, the holy city of Aratum plunged into the land below. In this chaos, the witch pulled herself and Ahzrak to safety in Hell, while the Slayer was transported back to the bishop's ship. This was a victory of sorts for the Sentinels, but it had come at a great cost. As they made their way to the Sentinel city of Taroth, King Novik ordered the construction of a new vault to secure the Heart of Argent. Upon their arrival, Thira questioned her father's decision to keep the artifact with him. Carrying it was dangerous, why not entrust it to the Slayer who could protect it? But Novik, still wary of the beast, explained that the heart was a part of Sentinel heritage, not the domain of the Makers or the Outlanders. He needed only to safeguard it until the vault was complete and the ships were refueled for the journey. Prince Ahzrak had come within reach of the one thing that could make him as powerful as the Doomslayer, and he was not willing to let it slip away so easily. So, he began the biggest assault so far on Taroth, determined to claim the Heart of Argent before the Sentinels could hide it again. Meanwhile, aboard the Creedmaker's ship, Maker drones watched as the Slayer fought against the mental conditioning of the Tether. Fueled by rage at his captors, he tore at the device in a bid to break their control, but each attempt unleashed surges of energy, endangering everyone on board. Though the Creed was reluctant to send the Slayer on yet another mission, he relented when the warrior threatened to break through the shield of his prison. Some drones suggested terminating the Slayer's life functions, but the bishop knew how dearly the Khan valued his power. For the first time in a while, the Doomslayer was deployed to a location with free will. He had broken free of the tether. The bishop, however, believed that even though the Slayer was free, they still had a hand in his fate as long as he wore the tether. The Sentinels could instantly see that this warrior was different. His eyes were clear. Though he could have unleashed his fury on those who had allowed his enslavement, he chose instead to direct his rage at the forces of Hell. With a force field raised over Taroth and evacuation ships being prepared, the Slayer set to work. Commander Thira had never seen the Slayer as her father had. She always treated him with respect and truly valued all he had done for their civilization. Now with that same respect, Thira asked, not commanded, the Unchained Predator to hunt down the cultists who had opened the portals on the local battlefield, destroy the gore nests beyond the city walls, and cut down every demon he found. If he did these things, the Sentinels could repair the defensive turrets and protect the evacuation ships as they departed. All was well until a giant portal opened and a Titan emerged. From that moment, everything changed. A Sentinel Atlan attempted to weaken the giant, but the Titan threw it into the force field protecting Taroth. The barrier shattered and left the city vulnerable to Ahzrak's forces. As Taroth filled with demonic entities, King Novik thought of those under his care. To ensure the lifeboats could escape, he drew the attention of the invaders away from the port. He knew they had come for the artifact that hung around his neck, and he was prepared to sacrifice himself so others might live. Yet, despite her father's courage, Thira worried for his safety and for the security of the Heart of Argent, so she asked the Slayer to help. By the time the Outlander arrived, Prince Ahzrak had already found King Novik and beaten him. He demanded there be no more tricks, and when the Slayer broke through the door, ready for battle, the witch, always hiding in the shadows, blasted him away. With a moment without interruption, the Dark Prince snatched the Heart of Argent from the broken king and opened it, only to find the soul inside was missing. He ordered Novik to tell him where the missing piece was, but before he could answer, the Slayer returned in an Atlan and spoke the first word he had in a while, "Run," as he fired at Prince Ahzrak. This was another great victory for the forces of Hell, and before the Slayer could kill the demon prince who had promised the return of her gods, the witch teleported him to safety. Aboard Thira's command station, the Night Sentinels struggled to recover from their defeat at Taroth. Not only had they lost a Sentinel city, but the Heart of Argent had been stolen. For the first time, the Slayer stood among them, freed from the restraints of his active tether. Commander Thira told him all that had transpired, the enemies they faced and what they sought. The Slayer had lived in darkness for so long, but now Thira had brought him back to the war table. She also warned him that if he ever tried to remove the Maker-designed tether, a failsafe would trigger, releasing a surge of devastating energy. In Hell, Prince Ahzrak once again searched for something, the soul of the last Wraith to place inside of the Heart of Argent. He sensed corruption across the earthly realm and found a potential ally, the Bishop of the Maker Ministry. This Maker had not only failed his queen, but he had also shown fear and selfishness in the face of disaster. Just as he had done with many others, Ahzrak reached out to him, this time through the body of a Maker drone, and offered him power. The Bishop knew he was not important to the Khan Maker, but he could be to Hell. All Prince Ahzrak wanted was some help, and to give himself some time to think about what to do, he had the Maker drone killed. To further enhance the Slayer and attain a stronger connection to him, Commander Thira asked the warrior to traverse a hallowed woodland by the name of the Abyssal Forest. It had once been a mine for the Sentinels before the legions of Hell had turned it into a graveyard. It was also here that the Abyssal Forge was located. Thira explained that the ancient ancestrals who had once walked this land had never truly died. Their hearts endured and their energy was harvested. The very heart of an ancestral powered this forge. It was also in this moment that the Princess of Argent D'Nur revealed more to him than she had to anyone else, a glimpse of Wraith magic that came from her soul. Using her power and the energy of the forge, Commander Thira enchanted the Doomslayer's shield with a rune. The Slayer had witnessed magic before, but nothing of this kind. Meanwhile, in Hell, Prince Ahzrak and the Witch observed this through the camera concealed within the Slayer's tether. The Bishop had granted them access after pledging his inevitable allegiance. As a being of the cosmic realm, Ulzamir recognized this as true Wraith power. Commander Thira herself was the Heart of Argent. She carried the soul of a Wraith within her, though she did not yet know the extent of her own power. And so, Hell set their sights on the Princess of Argent D'Nur. With his own free will, the Doomslayer decided to take the fight to Hell. The Forsaken Plains were home to Prince Ahzrak's castle, his throne, and his base of operations. The Night Sentinels had tried to cross this deadly landscape before, but none had succeeded. The Slayer, however, was different. With the help of the Sentinels, he entered a portal and arrived in Hell. Meanwhile, within his fortress, Prince Ahzrak and the Witch discussed their plan. She insisted that the ritual to claim Thira's soul be performed in her own realm. Now, with a Maker on their side, the Bishop offered them the coordinates of both the Slayer and Commander Thira. By the time the Slayer had fought his way through the Forsaken Plains, commandeered an abandoned Atlan and reached the fortress, Prince Ahzrak was already gone. Knowing he could not stand against the warrior in his current state, the prince chose to flee. Back on Argent D'Nur, aboard Commander Thira's station, the Bishop of the Maker Ministry requested a meeting. Unknown to the Sentinels, this was a trap. Just as the Slayer returned, the station went into lockdown as a demonic incursion began. Following security protocol, Thira and the Bishop were escorted to the command deck. This was all a part of the plan to distract the Unchained Predator just long enough to pull Thira into the cosmic realm. As the crew attempted to evacuate, the Slayer fought his way through the ship and mounted Serrat. Outside the station, he witnessed something new. A massive green portal from which tentacles emerged, writhing into the void. Using Serrat's mounted turret, the Slayer blasted each tentacle, breaking their grip on the station, and for a moment, it seemed a victory for the Sentinels as the remaining tentacles withdrew and the portal closed. But in a flash, the portal reopened, seized the command deck, tore it free from the station, and pulled it through. Before the Slayer could follow, the portal snapped shut. The Creed Maker's devious plan had succeeded. He had aided Hell and the Cosmic Realm in capturing Commander Thira. The abduction of the Argentine princess marked another devastating blow to the Knight Sentinels. But now, the Bishop's ministry offered their aid in retrieving her. Once again, this manipulation through the Bishop's sector was all part of Ahzrak's promise to the Witch. The ministry informed King Novik that there was a way to reach the realm where Thira had been taken, but it would require releasing an ancient deity who the Knight Sentinels and Wraiths had imprisoned ages ago. Under their instructions, the Slayer was sent alone to the northern sea of Esbovia to the Spire of Nerethal. Having worked with this warrior since his release from the tether, King Novik had begun to see him as more than a weapon. He saw a man, and he asked that this man return his daughter to him. The Doomslayer drained the sea using ancient Sentinel technology, and with Serrat's help, navigated the prison below, deactivating the 3 emitters that kept the creature in stasis. After retrieving the ballistic force crossbow left behind, he shattered the wall that confined the deity. As the Old One roared, the Slayer pulled the final safety switch and released it. In that moment, the Titan broke free from its chains and soared towards the breach in the sky. Without hesitation, the Slayer leapt onto the beast and rode with it through the portal. In that moment, he witnessed a region beyond space and time as the Old One soared through the void between dimensions. Despite his best efforts to hold on, the Slayer lost his grip and plunged into the light. The unholy alliance between Hell and the Cosmic Realm had proven successful. The Witch had helped Prince Ahzrak obtain the Heart of Argent, and now she had Commander Thira ready, prepared to claim her Wraith soul to power the artifact. In return, Ahzrak had used the Bishop to manipulate the Doomslayer into releasing the Old One. But as the Slayer journeyed towards the Cosmic Realm, Ahzrak saw an opportunity to neutralize this threat completely. After being engulfed by a blinding light, the Doomslayer found himself in a realm unlike any he had ever known, a place ruled by chaos and madness. Alone, he relied on his suit's guidance, following the faint signal of Commander Thira. Here, time, gravity, and space obeyed no familiar laws. As he explored the city of Raul, the Carthel marshes, and finally, the Temple of Lomarith, he saw how far this realm reached through the void. Entire vessels had been lured into this place, trapped in eternal stasis, their crews lost forever. The eyes of Titans stared down from swirling skies, while entities of both Hell and the Cosmic Realm appeared to challenge him. Even Argentine scholars, driven mad by the Witch herself, rose to fight this intruder from another world. Along his path, the congealed madness of this realm spoke to him. Olsmir declared that their god had returned, and woe to any who stood in its way. No longer would her realm be shackled to a dying cosmos. The stars bled, and the void called. Before the Slayer could enter the temple, the god he had released rose up and swallowed him whole. Yet, even this could not stop the unchained predator. He battled through the belly of the beast, pierced its heart with the cosmic-powered crossbow, and climbed free of its corpse as it died. Regaining his freedom, the Slayer ascended the many steps of Lomarith and found Thira locked in a state of unresponsiveness. He tried to free her, but in that moment, the Wraith within her awakened to defend its host. With a single touch from its tentacle, it mobilized the Godslayer completely. With the threat subdued, Prince Ahzrak, Ozmir the Witch, and the Bishop stepped from the shadows. The Demon Prince told the Slayer that the energy within Thira was too powerful, even for him. He declared that the Sentinels understood little of their own history or of the gods they had once worshipped. In this realm, Thira's power was at its peak, and only here could it be extracted. Prince Ahzrak had always fled from the Slayer, but now, seeing his enemy weakened, he found the courage to strike. He removed the human's helmet and struck him across the face with it. Ever concerned with his own survival, the Creedmaker urged them to kill the Slayer, but Ahzrak knew that even death could not stop this warrior. He had brought the Slayer to this realm seeking a fate more permanent than death. Unable to help Thira, he could only watch as the witch began the ritual. Etragos, Zarath, Mazakil. And with it, Thira's Wraith soul left her body and drifted into the heart of Argent that Prince Ahzrak held. As it entered the artifact, Prince Ahzrak absorbed the power of the Wraith, and he was elevated into godhood. Having finally seized the power he had always craved, Prince Ahzrak left the cosmic realm with Commander Thira as his prisoner. He possessed ultimate power, but it was bound to the life of the princess. The bishop too departed the realm, returning to Argent D'Nur. He told King Novik that their champion had come to save them, but a greater struggle had ensued, and only he had managed to escape. As King Novik received this grim report, the alarms of demonic incursion echoed through the halls, and a hell portal tore open before him. From its depths emerged the bloodied helmet of the Doomslayer, followed by Prince Ahzrak himself, already transformed, no longer just a demon prince, but ascending towards the form of a cosmic god. All the Sentinels could do was flee. Thira was lost, and they believed their greatest warrior to be dead. In the cosmic realm, the warrior awoke to discover the permanent solution Prince Ahzrak had chosen for him. He found himself standing on a circular platform suspended above an ocean of acid. Around him, 3 cosmic titans channeled energy at the platform, maintaining a powerful force field. It seemed the prince intended the Slayer to remain imprisoned for all eternity, but he was not so easily defeated. The force field was formidable, but Thira had once told him of the energy stored within the Maker tether. With nothing left to lose, he tore the tether from his armor, unleashing a surge of energy that blasted the Titan's back and shattered the force field. But the blast also destroyed the platform beneath his feet, and with nothing to hold on to, he plunged into the acid below. As the acid claimed him, the Slayer saw the mark often linked to him once more as he drifted between worlds. In the darkness, he heard King Novik's voice. They are rage, brutal, without mercy, but you will be worse. Rip and tear until it is done. The Doomslayer had fallen, and the whole of the earthly realm was open to Ahzrak's dominion. It was in the deepest reaches of the first layer of hell that the Doomslayer awoke, undead but not broken. In this harbour of souls, the damned were herded like cattle towards river barges, where the ferrymen waited to deliver them to their appointed circles. Though he had died, the Slayer would not accept eternal torment. He broke free from his restraints, seized a hell barge and steered it not deeper into damnation, but into the crossing between the realms of the living and the dead. Meanwhile, in the mortal realm, Commander Valen turned to the Sentinel monks for aid. Ahzrak's assault had left their cities in ruins, and without the Slayer, the Sentinels were powerless to resist him. In the Darkvale forest on the outskirts of the city of Eldarax, the monks gathered around the helmet of the fallen Slayer, chanting an ancient blood ritual. Valen wanted him back, no matter the cost. In that twilight forest between life and death, the Slayer heard distant chanting. Following the sound, he came upon the mark forever tied to his legend, the Mark of the Doomslayer. As he stepped into its center, he found himself once more on Argent D'Nur, alive, surrounded by his people. He understood at once that a ritual of dark power had brought him back, but as he met Valen's eyes and accepted his helmet, he saw only desperation there. In that moment, he knew he was needed not as a weapon, but as a brother in arms. As the Slayer made his way to Alderax, he was briefed on what had transpired during his absence. The Creedmaker's ship now floated above the overrun city. The Bishop had claimed to the Sentinels that he had surrendered to Hell's forces, but when the Night Sentinels recovered the Slayer's suit logs from the Cosmic Realm, the truth was revealed. The Creed had betrayed them. King Novik had always avoided direct confrontation with the Maker Angels, yet as the Slayer toppled Hell's siege towers and laid waste to the ranks of the Sentinel cultists, Novik relented. He granted his champion the freedom to punish the guilty as he saw fit. Having aided Alderax, Serrat offered his master a ride to the Bishop's ship. True to his nature, the Creed ordered his Maker drones to shield him from the Slayer, sacrificing them without hesitation, but their efforts were useless. As they came face to face and fought, the Creed pleaded that he had only done what was commanded of him. He insisted that he was worth more alive than dead. The Creed promised he could lead the Slayer to Prince Ahzrak, that Thira was still alive, and that he could help bring her back. But rage fueled the Slayer, and he tore the Bishop apart. On the battlefield, Prince Ahzrak reveled in his newfound power. He led hordes of demons against Sentinel strongholds, raising titans from his command ship. Once again, driven by the need to punish those who had wronged him, the Slayer leapt into action. Knowing the rage and might of this godlike warrior, King Novik bestowed upon the Slayer his highest honor, command of the Royal Atlan. With this war machine, the Slayer destroyed the Hellgate generators as the Night Sentinels crushed Ahzrak's forces in the background. As the Slayer drew near to the Demon Prince, Ahzrak unveiled his secret weapon. Through a dark and unholy ritual, Prince Ahzrak had resurrected the Old One, not as a god of the cosmic realm, but as another titan to fight for Hell. The witch, pleased that it had been restored in some form, continued her alliance with Ahzrak. Even after both had achieved their desires, the pact between Hell and the cosmic realm had endured. Yet, the Slayer cared nothing for gods. Wielding the raw power of the Royal Atlan, he defeated the corrupted Old One in combat and tore its head from its body. Empowered by the soul of a Wraith, Prince Ahzrak at last felt bold enough to confront the one his demons feared above all others. The Slayer wished to face the prince in single combat, not from within the Atlan. So he powered it down, stepped out, and prepared for battle. Even as cosmic power surged through him, transforming him with every moment, Ahzrak could not withstand the rage-fueled constant assault of his nemesis. That was until Ahzrak managed a single lucky strike with his spear. In that rare moment of vulnerability, the Slayer faltered, but as Ahzrak prepared to strike again, Serrat, ever loyal, roared from the skies and bathed the prince in fire. Annoyed by this interference, Ahzrak leapt forward and drove his spear through Serrat's neck, ending the dragon's life. After all he had endured, the once ordinary human marine rarely showed affection for anyone or anything. He had once had a family and had loved a small rabbit called Daisy, but both lost to the cruelty of demons. Now Serrat, his trusted dragon, the only companion he had come to care for, had also been taken from him right before his eyes. With every ounce of rage left in him, the Slayer unleashed his fury upon Ahzrak, who grew more monstrous with each passing moment. Wings, eyes, and raw power erupted from the prince, yet the onslaught of brutal strikes battered him down. Fueled by wrath, the Slayer hammered Ahzrak with his shield. Beaten and broken, Ahzrak was unable to stop the Slayer as he ripped the Wraith soul from him. And just like that, he was restored to his normal, weakened, demonic form. In the distance, as the Wraith energy flowed back into Thira, the spirit within her shattered her containment shell and drew her onto the battlefield, before her father and the Slayer, ready to be reunited with her soul. With his foes distracted, Ahzrak once again fled to hell. Once King Novik returned the heart of Argent to its rightful owner, Commander Thira of the Night Sentinels, the princess to the Sentinel throne, at last understood the power within her, when it must be used, and why. With no time to lose, Thira led a band of Sentinels into hell through a portal opened by her Wraith magic. At her side, Commander Valen, his son Maruk, and their mightiest warriors held back the infernal hordes, buying the Doomslayer all the time he needed to hunt down Prince Ahzrak and end his reign once and for all. In classic fashion, when the Demon Prince detected the close proximity of the Slayer, the coward once again attempted to flee on his ship, but this time, the Slayer was relentless. He jumped at the flying high-speed vessel and climbed on board. This time, there was nowhere for Ahzrak to go. As they came face to face once more, Ahzrak called upon the witch to aid him. He proclaimed that as long as he lived, he could resurrect her god as many times as necessary. Even this cosmic entity, formed from congealed madness, could not withstand the Slayer's fury, and collapsed. With Ulzmir defeated, Ahzrak cried out in desperation. He commanded his horde and declared that if the human killed him, the war would never truly end. Yet his words were hollow. The Doomslayer thrived in battle, tearing through demons without pause. Even if Ahzrak fell, there would always be more demons to hunt. As their battle raged on, the prince proved no match for the Slayer, and once again, he fell at his hands. With his back turned, Ulzmir summoned one last surge of cosmic madness. Driven by fury, the Slayer deflected her attack with his shield, turning her own power against her. Trapped in the ship's tangled wires, she could only watch as the shield crashed into her. As a conduit of the cosmic realm, the witch did not bleed. Instead, the energy that gave her form erupted in a blinding explosion. The force of such a volatile explosion shattered the witch's form, and whether she truly perished or her essence simply returned to the cosmic realm remains unknown. The ship, damaged in the blast, trapped the already wounded Prince Ahzrak. Below, as the Night Sentinels clashed with the demonic hordes, all heard the crash of the ship and the furious, agonized roars of the Demon Prince. He had failed time and again in his conquest, and it became clear he was not the ruler Hell required. Recognizing his failure, the stronger and wiser demons abandoned him to his fate. It was only when the Slayer returned to the battlefield with the head of Prince Ahzrak that Commander Thira, Commander Valen, and the brave Night Sentinels accepted that they had won this round of the unholy wars in the Dark Ages. Prince Ahzrak, the witch, and the traitorous bishop had fallen. This war, so far, had taken so much from the Sentinels. The Makers had granted them knowledge, power, and the promise of a place for their souls in Urdak upon their deaths, but the Makers' betrayal had changed everything. The Maker Church officially disavowed all actions taken by the Creed Maker, insisting he had acted alone. The Khan Maker vowed to bring justice to any who had aided him, yet King Novik's faith was gone. Quietly, he ordered the Sentinels to form their own Inquisition. This was their home, but the war was far from over. They would defend it just like their ancestors had. They were also thankful to him, the Doomslayer, who had given everything for their world. As for the beast, upon the defeat of Prince Ahzrak, he had commandeered the bishop's ship and began his own mission across the realms. The Sentinels knew that wherever he was, he would return when needed. But what of the future? The Codex entries of Doom Eternal reveal what lies ahead. The Khanmaker succumbs to the corruption of a Dark Lord of Hell. Argent energy, a fusion of Hell Essence and Sentinel energy, is introduced by the Makers to aid in the war. Commander Valen's son is lost, and in his grief, Valen betrays his own kind in a desperate bid to bring him back. All of this culminates in the Slayer's long battle in Hell, before he is sealed within a sarcophagus, waiting to be discovered at the dawn of Doom 2016. So much happens, and hopefully, we will get to explore these moments in the DLC. This video is a little longer than normal. I try to post at least 3 times a month, but this was a bigger project. I wanted to get all of those little details in there and explain the backstory so that even the smallest references of Doom the Dark Ages made sense. I prefer working on these longer deep dive topics too, so there may be more like this in the future. Prince Ahzrak annoyed me so much while writing this. His biggest character trait was running away. Only when he got his hands on power did he try to match the Slayer, and when he was defeated, ran away again. I loved exploring Argent D'Nur when it was actually populated, and really enjoyed the glimpse of the cosmic realm we received. I do hope it means there could be a connection to Quake in the future. With so many characters and plot lines open, I cannot wait for the DLC and beyond. What happens to Commander Thira, the King? Will we see Commander Valen's son die? These are just some of the elements I am excited to see. id Software once again continued an amazing story. I have also seen all the comments asking if I'm going to update my Doom timeline with the Dark Ages, and the answer is yes, but only when the DLC is released. That was everything I wanted to say. If you enjoyed this video, then I would love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments section below. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Queen Arby, Lewis, Oren X, Drakey Phoenix, Daniel Cal Drawings, 501st Clumboy, Ruben Mendoza, Imperial Embers, Canifex, Jimsy, Average Sol, Azu, Jonas, Yali Rodriguez, Detroit, Motzi, Brina Lee, Jacqueline Lavelle, King Jack, and Lifeblood. What did you think of the Dark Ages? What do you hope to see in the DLC? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.